and welcome back! I'm very excited to talk about this video's book, but before I do that, if it wasn't obvious already, I am feeling a bit under the weather, but I have to get this video done because I've been procrastinating all since I've read this book since back like a month or two ago, okay? It's almost the end of December, I want to get it done, so. And today is A Promise of Blood by Brian McClellan. It's the first of the Power Mage trilogy, and boy am I excited to continue it. I've actually had this book on my shelf for a while now, like I'm talking years maybe. But I never picked it up because the size is intimidating. Like it's almost 600 pages long. That's like twice the size of a normal book. It's 2 books in 1 book, okay? But I've recently managed to clear the waitlist and made my way onto the Broken Binding subscription, which means I can finally cancel all of those other book boxes that I do not need. And it just so happened that this month's series was the Power Mage. Even though I already had the whole trilogy, I didn't want to skip my very first subscription. So I just said screw it, and I went ahead and, got it anyway. All their books are so gorgeous. I'm so glad I did it. Oh, I was going to show it to you, but I don't have it here with me. Anyway, I was showing it off to everybody. I was bragging about the jacket, the cover art, the inside art, the sprayed edges. I mean, I love it. It was such a beautiful book. And like, even though I was so intimidated before, I just immediately started reading it. It just jumped out at me, and I did it. And like 10 pages in or so, I knew immediately that this was going to be a 5-star book. And I know there are a lot of people out there who think, oh, well, it's just average for a fantasy book. But like, especially me, who's had a long run of just reading these string of misfortunes, when you finally get a book like this, it's a fantasy miracle. Sometimes it just takes a whole lot of bad ones to see a really good one. So yeah, when you're constantly reading these fantastic top seller fantasy books, you're gonna get a little bit numb to it. You're gonna keep thinking, oh well, these are all just, the same thing. I mean, yeah, they're all fantasy books, but when you read a bunch of crappy other books and then you get a book like this, you get to really appreciate it. I'm gonna try to be a little bit more organized since there's so much to unpack with this book. I'm trying not to touch on spoilers either, because that could be a whole other video by itself, going into every little action and the plot by itself. So right now I'm just going to give my general opinion of the book, starting with the plot summary. So this part isn't spoilery, even though it seems like it, but basically it's like the very first thing in the book. It starts the whole thing and it sets it into motion. I think it's even on the summary of the book, so it's not really a spoiler. But the story starts in the city of Adro. Or is it Adro? I think it's Adro. Anyway, we're Field Marshal Thomas. Is it Tomas? Or is it Thomas? A battle-hardened military leader. He stages a coup to overthrow the monarchy. And it's the usual story where the rich are leeching off of the people's taxes and they're just playing with the money instead of feeding their people. And this is obviously angering everybody. Except what makes it different about this story is that there's an elite group of sorcerers known as Powder Mages, roll credits, to take down the king. And I'll talk more about the magic later because it's like a huge part of the book, which... Yes, okay. It's a huge part of the book. The sudden coup plunges Adro into chaos, and Tomas is kind of left to deal with the treacherous politics that comes afterwards. And the poor thing, because, raging a war seemed so much easier than dealing with all of this. The nation already, teeters on the brink of a civil war, and Thomas is trying to just secure his hold on keeping the people together, while at the same time, they're defending themselves from outside threats, like a neighboring empire that is trying to take advantage of the recent turmoil to, take them over. So then you're left with major questions like, is the threat or, is the risk of security worth taking down the leaders if it means opening yourself to a threat from the outside? Or how are you going to deal with both situations when you're only adept in one? Or, who's going to take over the roles now that this space is left? And, A Promise of Blood is filled with all these battles, and there's tons of betrayal. I don't mean to sound so excited when I say that, but and it's the theme. There's this running theme of having power and misusing it, and the abuse of it in a bunch of different ways. The characters are constantly being tested, personally, as well as politically, and I'm 100% here for it. So let's talk about those characters. We follow several perspectives throughout all of the chapters, and they're all involved in the story some way, of course. But there are some times where the book feels really long. And while I'm reading, I try to think, could any of this actually be cut or taken out? I could think of maybe at least 2 or 3 different characters and that were kind of unnecessary, or at least their perspectives. Or I don't know if maybe it just wasn't necessary, or the ones I didn't like. And you're not going to like every character, which is okay. But I find that mostly I did, except for 1 or 2. And they're the ones that seemed unnecessary. Okay, Field Marshal Thomas. Tomas is the central character of the story, and he is the mastermind behind the coup that overthrows the Adrian monarchy. He's very formidable as a military leader, and he's skilled as a powder mage as well. He's really driven by a sense of justice and duty, but his actions always seem to have some kind of consequence. And his biggest hurdle seems to be his personal vendetta against the enemy empire for something that happened in his past. And I'm not going to try to spoil it, but it's really tough when you're forced to make choices between being professional and what you feel personally, emotionally. His character is really complex, as it's torn between his responsibilities as being a leader and also his relationship with his family. And he's also stressed out with this responsibility of having to take care of the people after the coup, because really it's not really his job. He's not a leader, he's not the king, he's a military leader, but it was his plan and his plot to do it, and he did it, so now you have to fix it. And I love watching him work, and in the way that his mind works, and he quickly became my favorite. Anyway, that was until Taniel showed up. Taniel Two-Shot is actually Tomas's son, and a gifted powder mage. He's probably the most prominent figure in the story. He seems to have the most screen time, as I would say. He's tasked with hunting down a rogue sorcerer. He's really good at that. And eventually he's even dragged to the front lines of the war, which is one of the most exciting parts of the book. Because where Tomas is actually dealing with the strategy part of it, Taniel is actually dealing with the action part of it. So it doesn't stay very boring for very long. And he's got the most character development when it comes to relationships with the other characters. He communicates a lot with the other ones, and he struggles with this loyalty to his father. Not wanting to, what's the right word? Just concede to what he says, because I said so. That kind of thing. He thinks, you wouldn't talk to another soldier like this. You're telling me to do this because you're telling me as a dad to the son to do this when it's convenient. I get that. But at the same time, he trusts him the most, more than anybody else, because he's his son, and he doesn't want anybody else to do this. I want you to do this because you'll do it right. He also has an interesting view when it comes to dilemmas of war. Even his own sense of purpose. He struggles with what is the point of being here, the point of doing this, the point of doing that. He's able to see the results and the consequences, which Tomas doesn't really get to see until after they happen. And he carries us through some of the best action scenes, which is really fun to watch. And he gets screwed over a lot when it comes to his father, especially, ignoring their status. And one of the most interesting things with him too, just like Tomas, was his backstory. I don't want to spoil it, but he has sort of this heartbreaking history of his relationship. And it's not touched on a lot, but the emotional turmoil of it is. And it makes him really human and relatable to watch him deal with that, while trying not to deal with that. And it's also through him that we get interaction with Capol, his mysterious and mute traveling companion. They have an interesting dynamic of their own that only them two can really understand. And if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't interact much with her. So then we have Adamat. Adamat is a retired police inspector who becomes Tomas's spy and advisor. He's known for his deductive skills, and he's kind of an intermediary between Tomas and the city's underworld, should we say. He does provide a unique perspective, mostly because he's on the street. He gets to see the civilians and what happens to them as it's unraveling. So he lets us see firsthand what goes on below Tomas's radar. Everybody else is high up on the importance scale, and he's kind of a normal guy. So we get to see that up close. The book actually opens with his perspective, and I thought he was going to be the main character just because of how it started with him. And that quickly wasn't the case. And I'm glad for it because I find myself kind of hating this character. I don't know why, really. You know, his family is his biggest driving point, and that's also important to me, and I respect that. But at least he guides us through the main central mystery concerning the book's plot. Except it's kind of really of like an urgent thing. And he seems like just the old classic archetype of the jaded detective, and he's like taking his time, and he's just like, you know, smoking a cigarette. I'm like, come on, man, urgency here. We really have no choice but to rely on him to get through this investigation, because Thomas has like important things to do, paperwork and all this, so only he can do the investigation of the mystery. So yes, in this book we have it all, actually. We have the action, we have the mystery, we have the politics, and we have magic, and Adamant is the mystery part of it. So we have also Nyla. Nyla is a laundress caught up in the chaos of the revolution, and she kind of has to just survive when the purge sort of happens, and she ends up trying to blend in with the other side. She gets a few chapter perspectives, but I really struggle to find the meaning of it. Only thing I could think of is maybe it's set up for a sequel or something. I don't really care about the sequel when I'm reading the book right now. Something else, though, I really enjoyed about the characters is they all have they have meaning, even if they don't have a personal chapter perspective. From even the 5 on the council and trying to tell who's genuine or not, who's maybe trying to figure out, you know, who's a snake or can you trust any of the rich people, the noble people, to Taniel's ex, to the bone magic of Capole, or even to Mage breaking bounty hunters. The witty Olim, he's personal guard to Thomas, who I love him too. Even Mahali, the mysterious chef, who the soldiers would die for. I love all these characters. So let's talk about the writing style. And it's true what they say about humor being the key to a girl's heart, because I feel like humor is everything, right? And I feel like there were several times in this book where I've literally laughed out loud. The witty dialogue is just very lovely. It's lovely. There's a good balance between being descriptive and straightforward. When we enter a new room or area, we get spoiled to like this lovely description of it. Sometimes the intricate world building section of fantasy books can be a bit overwhelming, but I actually found myself like flipping back and referring to the map just for fun. But I never truly got lost like in some of the other novels that I've read, even though most of it actually takes place in one area. The detailed descriptions of the magic, the action scenes, the settings, they're all well done. They let me create a mental image like a movie as I'm reading the book. And there were several times where like I'm reading the book to myself and there's somebody sitting beside me, and then I'll just be like, oh, this writing is so good, listen to this. And then I'll just give an example and like legit brag about how graceful it sounded. I'm just really glad that it didn't hook us in with that one scene and the rest was politics for the rest of the book. It actually spoiled us to a rage of like actions and all these different themes. It's very dynamic, and I couldn't wait to get to more fighting. Even the characters' inner thoughts, their emotions, their personal dilemmas, they're all portrayed perfectly. It helped me grasp a strong connection to what they were feeling without actually telling me straight up what to feel, and I love that about it. I keep talking about like themes and motives, and let's talk about some of those. The most obvious one is revolution. Like I said before, there's this challenge of what comes after you overthrow a monarchy and trying to establish a new government, because everybody thinks, oh, we don't need a leader, we don't need rules. But I mean, in reality, yeah, you do. The problem is everybody wants to lead. Everybody wants to lead in their own way, and I almost feel like it comes a little bit too close to real life political statements, which I hate in books. But I understand that this book needs a plot. That's why I was able to push it down, because it was just a plot. They wanted to kill a king, and then you have to deal with what comes after that. Who's going to feed everyone? Who's going to work? Who's going to pay for everyone? Who will protect us if there's no king to pay for an army? Who's going to keep order when there are no more guards around to stop criminals? And fortunately, Tomas is prepared for that, most of that, as it comes up. Because another theme is power and responsibility. Those with power have to be careful with how they use it, because you don't want to just put another person in power, or that just negates the purpose. You risk angering everybody and throwing their lives into chaos for nothing if you're just going to repeat the cycle. So it raises good questions about the ethical use of it, and it only takes 5 people to control a city. Someone will always be better, more richer, more connected. So whether you like it or not, you have to make allies with these people because you don't want to make enemies of those people. The next one I was kind of excited about is magic and technology. The combination of magic and technology, more specifically, it's an interesting theme because it explores how the use of magic through powder mages affects like military advancements. And there's also duty and sacrifice. Because many of these characters end up having to sacrifice something really important to them, for the cause of duty. Whether it's their nation, or their family, or their principles. And there's another one about change and progress. It talks about how societies adapt to change, the resistance to progress, the clash between traditional values and new ideas, and the tensions between maintaining order and embracing change. Well, some people don't like it. Some people are here for it. Now the fun part. We get to talk about the magic systems. Yay! A big part of the book here is the magic. That's why I picked it up, of course. It's known for its creativity in that section, and it's a blend of magic and technology, which I did not see coming, and I did not know I would enjoy it as much as I did. I'm not a big sci-fi fan, and I don't like real fantasy. I don't like anything based in the real world. I don't like books or whatever, even shows that take place and they're like, oh, we're in New York again, or we're in whatever, and we just have magic powers. I don't like that kind of stuff. But I love this, because I still felt like it was historical fantasy, even though it was still grounded in the real world rules. It's powder mages. One of the central magic systems revolves around those. And they have a unique magical ability related to gunpowder. They're elite marksmen, what have you. They can manipulate it in various ways after they intake it, whether it's snorting or eating. With that comes a range of abilities, including enhanced senses, such as enhanced vision and hearing. They could use their third eye, as they call it, to sort of go like Assassin's Creed mode and locate things that stand out, like other magic users or powder traces on a person. It's really, really neat to watch. There's detonation, they can ignite and control gunpowder from a distance, and they could turn it into a deadly weapon. Tabas particularly like this. Some of them could even control a bullet in different ways, like enhancing the strength behind it or curving the direction, which some people might say is kind of Matrix-like. I don't know. Sometimes they don't even need guns to do it, but it does help take off some of their strain, because I imagine, like people using their wands or their hands, it helps channel your attention. Another little interesting feature that we have in this book are called knack. These are individuals, they have like unique magic abilities, but they're not as powerful as full-blown mages, but they still have some kind of special talent. But it's only like a particular one. Like some might have a knack for heightened accuracy, while others can sense lies. Some could go without sleeping ever, or they're able to pick any kind of lock. They call these low-level skills, but in my opinion, it's really cool to be 100% good at one particular thing, instead of like just averagely good at everything. They also have this thing called bone eye magic, but it's not touched on too much because it's kind of a very mysterious power that only one character starts to display. And it's very shrouded and involves using bones and wards to manipulate strong magic. And it gives healing too. It's almost like voodoo, and in the sense that they even use a doll. There's another important type of magic user that they call privileged, and it's sort of the antithesis to powder mage. These are naturally born magicians, and they can tap into what's known as the else, and they manipulate elemental magic, and they have strong telekinesis. Only powder mages seem to stand a chance against them, and vice versa. They sort of place themselves high on the tier list also. They only like work for the most competent people. They use special rune-bearing gloves to give them away, and it sort of like categorizes them also. You could tell what they do just by looking at them. But they also have to use their hands to direct magic, so sometimes they get threatened to get their hands cut off or, tied up or things like that. So it's very interesting to see how they fuse magic with technology. It makes it so like muskets, cannons, gunpowder are all very important to the magic system. And I haven't even touched on the world building yet. Remember, Adro was on the brink of war with a neighboring nation after the king actually tried to sell out. And the people said no. We also have range of environments and landscapes are also important. So it's not like you're just stuck in the city. In fact, one of my favorite scenes in the book take place on top of a very snowy mountain, which is really cool. Then you have the political thing going on in the background, where Thomas now has tried to keep control over a group of powerful people known as his own personal council. And that goes as well as you could probably think it does. There's also an underlying current of religion and beliefs. There's a clash of traditional magic and religion, because even though religion isn't actually a skill, it's still as powerful as the magic. And Adro is led by one main god, which is Kresimir, the rope as they call him. And it quickly becomes a challenge in the background, which we know the biggest contests are usually between the church and the state, right? So despite how long this book was, I actually devoured it. Like 600 pages gone in 2 to 3 days. Everything just came together so well, and anything that was like said or done always had a purpose. It came back up later on. And there were a few scenes that had me very emotional or defensive. But for the sake of spoilers, I won't mention it. Just know that all the connections between these characters are handled really well. So they're all very relatable and very genuine. I think I covered all the strengths pretty well, but if I had to list the weakness, I guess, it's important to note that the reader's perspectives on weaknesses can vary. And what one reader might view as a weakness, someone else might not. So this is just an opinion. But I guess maybe the complexity of it, it can be very overwhelming for some readers, especially if they're not used to fantasy books. I feel like you really had to be paying attention or you'd get lost. But I didn't have that problem at all with this book. I usually even take notes so I don't get lost. But this time I didn't do that at all. I just read the book straight through and I had no problem following it. Some people have also mentioned that it's kind of difficult to keep track of all the characters that get introduced. The only worry I had was when they introduced all the council members at once. I was worried that it was going to be like a constant name dropping and you would just be expected to remember who was who. But it was still easy to remember because they sort of help you with titles. And they only show up when they have something relevant to say. So that helps a lot. The pacing. Some people have complaints that some sections of the book seem to be slower, especially when the story shifts back to character focus and political scenes. Again, I didn't really see that. I thought it was the perfect amount of balance. There were some scenes that I thought unnecessary, but like not ever to the point to where I got bored enough to where I didn't want to read anymore. It helped that the chapters changed constantly, so you weren't ever stuck on one character perspective, especially since all the characters sort of deal with different themes and sections. So if it was a political theme in one chapter, then it was action in the next. The magic system. I think it's very unique, and it's a strength in my opinion. But some people might get confused with it. I just happened to have a gun guy nearby, and while I was reading, I would like actually stop frequently and ask about gun details. And he would describe to me how certain gun parts work, how certain things work. And we had a good discussion about it, and that was really helpful, and it got me more immersed in the book. So that was helpful, I suppose. I find it fun not knowing exactly. I could just imagine the magic. I don't have to know whether everything's 100% accurate or not. I don't care. I just enjoy the aesthetics of it. And again, some readers have noted how few female characters there are. I personally don't care. I don't care what their gender is or any of that. I only care about what the actions are and what people do in a story. So there's that. If I had to recommend it to readers, I'd say for anyone interested in military fantasy or for more complex magic systems, political intrigue, and it's definitely for adults, which I appreciate it. And so it would be more relatable for other adults to read it. So in conclusion, I have no choice but to rate this book 5 stars. With its blend of magic and technology, political intrigue, well-developed characters, and an action-packed story, it's definitely going to the top of my list for the year. Thank you so much for joining me on this review. I hope it helped, and I hope I got my point across just how much I actually love this book. I tried so hard to avoid spoilers, which is why it seemed so general. So please let me know what you think. If you enjoyed it also, I hope you did. Thank you again, and until next time.